What if I told you the greatest power a leader has is the power to give? In a world where leadership is often seen as command and control, what happens when leaders choose generosity instead? Today, I'm joined by Joe Davis, former head of North America for the Boston Consulting Group and author of the inspiring new book, The Generous Leader: 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain. Joe brings decades of leadership experience at the highest levels, and now he's here to share how generosity, humility, and humanity can transform the way we lead. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. I'm greatly honoured today to be joined by Joe Davis. Joe was the former head of North America for the Boston Consulting Group and had a very decorated career with that organisation, helping organisations around the world to improve their businesses. But he's also the author of a new book called The Generous Leader. And that's what we're going to lean into today. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a generous leader? The word servant leadership is often talked about, sometimes in a negative way. So we're going to unpack that as well and lean into what it means to be this generous leader. And I'm dying to get into this. So without any further ado, Joe, I'd love it if you say hello to the audience. Once again, congratulations on your decorated career. Then I want to know why this book, what inspired you to write this book, and what inspired you to write this book now?
Well, first off, Mick, it's great to be here. Thank you. Thank you for the very kind words. I'm glad you didn't go through my entire career because it's just not really that necessary. So the book, well, as you said, it's called The Generous Leader: 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain. And what really, I'm just a big believer in, now leaders need to bring their human self to work. Not completely, not 100%, but things have changed. And, you and I are looking for some humanity from our leaders and vice versa. Now, what inspired me, it's actually, there was years of learning. That's from 37 years at BCG and 6 at Procter & Gamble, of course, years at learning. After we went through COVID, which had all kinds of bringing together the best or the worst of your management capabilities, you might say, and your leadership capabilities. And then my colleagues said, you ought to write a book about management, actually, or leadership. I did a little start, actually had a Harvard Press read it. And she goes, no book, because it was quite heavily on COVID. Because by the time the book's out, which takes them 2 years to get a book out, no one wants to read about COVID. And she actually suggested bring more stories in, bring other executives in and talk about what you consider this type of leader, what you call it, servant or generous or leading with the heart, whatever I think is critical. I also, one other quick answer to that, I learned as I was writing that the average business book sells 247 copies. And, if Brené Brown is selling 1 million and Adam Grant and Malcolm Gladwell, most of us are selling 10. I thought, oh my gosh, is this even worth it? And a friend of mine said, Joe, if you write the book and inspire 8 people to change their leadership behavior in some ways, obviously for what I consider the positive, and this friend of mine, that'll be worth it. Now, my goals are now bigger than 8 people, but that's really, I thought, okay, that's a goal I can strive for. So, and then it's just, it's fun. It's a lot of work to write a book, as you probably know, but it's fun, and it's fun when it's out. So that's for damn sure.
Yeah, really good, Joe. I love the message there around impact, the impact of your message, and it is far more than 8, to be clear. But have a think about that for a second. People spend up to 1/3 of their life in the workplace, and the difference between whether they have a very good day or a very bad day usually rests at the feet of their leader. So it's not just 8 people you're impacting, it's the 8 teams that you're impacting, and it's the families of those teams, because the people are going home feeling like they had a good day and they're not stressed out and all this kind of stuff. But it's far more than 8. But what I was trying to say is there's a multiplication effect even there, even if it was only 8. Now, something interesting that you said there, you use the word human, you use the word humanity, you use the word bring yourself. Now, the challenging question to start, that is how it should be. What I want to know from Joe Davis, with all of your decades of experience, not to make you sound old, by the way, Joe, but with your decades of experience, what prevents people from showing up as their authentic self? It's a great goal. It's an obvious goal, but it doesn't work all the time.
No, and I think, there's so many things depending. Everyone's a little bit different, right? Some of us said I was 40 years of work experience. Let's say that's almost, we might have come from a time where, hey, 9 to 5, work is work, home is home, separate them. That it could be as simple as that. To don't show yourself, don't cry, don't say you don't know, always be on top of it, which is really inauthentic unless you're perfect. And I haven't met that person yet. That can be drilled into you. Or just a simple fear of looking weak or of exposing yourself. But I think as a leader, a lot of it is they think, gosh, I have to appear to be in charge all the time and know exactly where I'm going all the time. Isn't that what I was taught? And if the minute that wobbles, a lot of leaders start to get more uncertain. I actually argue if you are uncertain and it wobbles and they see it, you're actually going to inspire people to follow you more. But we can go deeper into that.
Yeah, so one of the things that you said there was the fear of not knowing the answer, or that you're going to be seen as weak if you don't know the answer. But that's going to be a recipe that we just continue to exacerbate that. So you use the word fear there. I'm curious here. Is it fear? Is it the fear of, I don't know, almost imposter syndrome, that I'm going to be caught out, that I'm in a job that I should never have given? Or is it that we're just mimicking the behavior of the leaders that came before us? A combination of those things? What do you think it is, Joe?
Well, my sense, of course, it's going to be a combination. I mean, whomever your mentor was or someone you admired, whatever they might have inspired. But if they were someone that was quite open and vulnerable, you're not going to be that way. I actually think more it's fear. I mean, may I indulge with a story? I had a friend of mine, and asked him about, when does he stepped over his line and showed more vulnerability or authenticity, whatever. And he told me a story. He said, I was afraid to say I don't know in front of to my teams. And he's a black male, so he's a little bit caught up in, oh gosh, I can't look like I don't, even more so in his head, And he said one time, what would happen if his team started to get lost? He would leave the room before they might turn to him and say, what do you think we ought to do, if he didn't know the answer either? He wouldn't say, I don't know. Now, that's not very productive, as you might imagine. So one time he stayed in, he said, this was, he realized this is just an utter waste of time. And he said, I don't know either. And he said it was stunning to him because instead of thinking, oh, what's wrong with you? It was like this burst of energy. Oh, you don't know. We don't know. None of us know. Well, let's now team together to come up with the answer. And so this creative energy was unleashed because others' fears, oh, if he can admit or she can admit they don't know, I guess I can admit I don't know. Oh, I guess I can maybe start asking questions, start brainstorming, etc. And you just unlock others' roadblocks, whatever they might be. And saying, I don't know. Sometimes, oh, Joe, you say vulnerable, you're supposed to cry. I think you can say, I don't know. And I think that's vulnerable, but it isn't the end of the world.
Yeah. So I think it's 3 of the most powerful words that any leader can use. And my lived experience is the same as yours. It opens up a floodgate of other people going, yeah, I don't know either. Let's talk about it. And before you know it, you're in co-creation. You don't have to be the smartest in the room. Your job is to create an environment where everyone can co-create the answer. You don't have to have all the answers, but it can be a hard hurdle for people to overcome, Joe. So what advice could you give if someone's listening to the show right now and they're going, yeah, that's me too. I don't. I'm still stuck in the limiting belief of if I say I don't know, it's a sign of weakness. What advice could you give to someone that's still living that today? How can we get them to take that first step?
Well, I mean, the one obvious thing, since I'm kidding a little bit, but since I don't know isn't that hard, just say it and see what happens. If it doesn't work, the next day will be fine. The next minute will be fine. But I will say that once I asked a friend of mine about this, or not once, as I was writing the book, and he said, well, Joe, what he remembered is he said, I used to look back whatever years at something that happened where I exposed myself and was very vulnerable. And I thought, oh my God, but lo and behold, I made it through. Look what happened. It was better. It didn't hurt. So one thing I might suggest is just think back to a time where you were more vulnerable than you might have wanted to be. And what happened? I mean, you're successful. You're in a leadership job. So things continued on and then take a little step. Another person gave me counsel that a female leader, she said, I'll always watch when any other leader expresses some authenticity or vulnerability. I don't want to copy them, but just how they do it, how the people react to it. It's usually not shut down. It's usually with, as you just said, openness. So I think the one thing is one simple step. Think back to a time say, hey, I made it through that, and look for a chance to expose a little bit of uncertainty so you unleash the others.
Yeah, really good, Joe. And it's certainly not terminal. It's exactly the opposite. And if you're paying attention, and it can be to other leaders around you, yeah, what happened when that person said, I don't know, did the world end? No, it didn't. It actually unlocked a conversation that needed to be happen. Yeah, really good. All right, so let's get into this term, the generous leader. I said at the start that servant leadership, and to be clear, I'm a fan, and yeah, I fully subscribe to servant leadership, and I believe our job is to create the environment where people can do their very best work and to be a multiplier and unlock the world for them and remove barriers and all this kind of stuff. But the word servant leadership is a sticking point for some people, and I've come across people that have told me this directly, saying, "Well, then I'm not a servant," and it brings up thoughts of servitude and all this kind of stuff. So I'm really pleased to hear you use the word generous leader.
Well, use my word then, right?
Yeah. So how do we move the world forward to realize that no, this is a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, and let me describe first of all, when I say the generous leader, what I mean quite simply is someone who gives them the leader who gives of themselves freely without expectation of direct personal benefit to help others grow, thrive, develop, grow, and thrive at their full potential. That's what you're really doing, as you just said. It's not about paying more. Some people tease me. And it's not about just being nice. This may be where sometimes you're a leader. Joaquin Duato, first I'll say myself, if you don't get results as a leader, you lose your job. So you've got to get the results. Now, I think as Joaquin Duato, CEO of J&J, said to me, he said, Joe, of course, outcomes matter. But the sooner you as a leader realize it's not about yourself, but it's about unlocking the traits, the human capabilities of those with whom you work, the sooner you will get to the best outcome. Now, that's just one guy, CEO, but it's a pretty successful company. But, the point is, just as we talked about authenticity and vulnerability, you need everybody else to be humming. And you, by the way, will win. But if that's your goal, if they just think, I'm going to make all you work, so I'm a superstar, they smell that, they feel that, and you're not going to move them. If it's all about, if you're great and you're great and you're great, oh, and by the way, the outcomes are exceptional and I as a leader get credit, so be it. It's this when I was I led the West Coast of BCG for a while, and it was performing okay, but not the level of it should have been. And I had a pretty nice run. It turned around dramatically. And I was very impressed with my own firm because it's funny, I was on the review committee of the partners, except when we had to review ourselves, we'd step out and get reviewed, then come back in the room. It was a very weird dynamic. But the feedback to me is, hey, Joe, this is great. West Coast is humming. You're having a good year. But if we look at all the people in the West, they've all stepped up their game. And that's the real value. And I was so proud of my own firm for acknowledging that's what the benefit me and the leadership in that role brought. Not that I did well, but that everybody else did. So then, of course, if you step away, hopefully their game, the game continues, and it should continue if you really help them develop to different levels.
Yeah, if you've unlocked their potential and you've been the multiplier, they might grow to greater heights than anyone could have ever imagined and outgrow your team. But the impact is huge. Let me share one other limiting belief that some people have around this same thing, and that is around alignment, right? So the other thing, if you go too purist into servant leadership and just take what you hear on face value, the fear is then, okay, so I'm going to go to my team. Let's assume it's a team of 7. And I'm going to say to them, okay, what would you like to do today? And I'm going to be funny here for a minute, Joe. Obviously, it would never be like this. But you end up with one, I'd like to do a bit of macrame today. And another one says, well, I'd like to play golf today. And I'm being silly, but what I mean is, how do you get the alignment so everyone is rowing in the same direction in this kind of environment where you are engaging them in the journey, but making sure that we're still all pointing in the same direction. We still have purpose. We still have a mission that we're trying to achieve. How do you align this approach of that engaging and empowering your team and saying, I empower you, I entrust you, but then make sure that everyone's got their eye on the greater purpose?
Yeah, you actually asked quite a rich question. So I got to think about how to answer without spending If you want to, I mean, first of all, I'm going to say, assume, well, it doesn't matter if you're running a soccer team as a coach or if you're running a business. I assume you want to win in the soccer team. That maybe, but if it's 4-year-olds, you have to win. So, but if you're playing high school coach, you want to win. So the first off, but I'll use business. You are running a business. The job is outcomes. You know that. They know that. Everybody else. So let's don't forget that. So someone said, I want to go fishing. Well, what the blank? Really? Okay, go fishing. Just don't come back. I'm teasing, but that's as much as you were teasing. The first part, then I do think we'll spend much time with them, but actually it's quite important. And that's just not human leaders, that people are clear on where you're going. And I was actually learning a lesson because I like to talk about it in terms of numbers. I had colleagues that, Joe, but you got to tell me the soft side of where we're going. What's it going to feel like when we got there? So I learned, okay, I like to lead with numbers. It's very clear what to do. This other person, so you got to bring both messages. You don't know how people are going to click to, where are we going? So there's some clarity on where, not some, there's be very great clarity on where we're going. But then I think more along the lines of the generous leader part, if you are growing, developing, and inspiring people, they're not going to say, I'm going to go fishing. I mean, if they're having an off day and need to go fishing, so be it. I mean, that's life, the day off, like whatever. But, then they're going to want to go with you if they understand where the driving outcomes and they understand where the outcomes are. Then people are looking for ways to, how do you contribute? I mean, I talk about being inclusive. Now, I know there's inclusive in the sense of DE&I, which I also care deeply about. But in this context, I mean, be inclusive of your people and have them engaged in the thinking. And, not everybody can be in every meeting. But I used to be quite active. This is something somebody could do. Just bring 1 or 2 people that don't normally participate in your planning meetings or whatever into the room. Ideally, maybe someone a little more junior than usual. Ask them some questions. They're going to be nervous, but don't beat them up. Just bring them into the room. And I had people say, Joe, you'd bring us in the room. And my gosh, when I kind of saw the thinking and where we were going, I walked out and thought, what else can I do beyond just my role to actually contribute to this? Because now I get more than my little piece. And besides the fact that when you bring them in the room and ask a question, they feel included, they feel inspired, they feel motivated, they feel good. Oh, you actually recognize I'm in here. But I would say when I walk in a room, I'll always look for the most junior person, and I'll talk to them immediately and first. My chief of staff or my colleague, I always look, how are you? Whatever. And I was like, oh, wow, this leader cares about everybody in the room, not just, his team, his or her team.
Yeah, really good, Joe. So I'm going to paint a picture of everything that I was imagining when you're talking, and I've seen these things with my own eyes. And for people listening to this is another leap of faith, but I'm going to say trust Joe and I on this one, that it really works, about the power of asking questions. So let me paint the picture then. So what I'm hearing from you, Joe, is yes, we do need to have a vision of where we need to go. There was an adaptive leadership element in there that some people want to know what is our target financially. Other people, it's an emotional journey for them. So you have to adapt to the way someone likes to be led. So that requires a conversation there as well to understand your people. But then we are painting the vision of this is the top of the mountain that we're trying to climb, team. But then you're turning to them and saying, now we know where we want to go. How do you think we should get there? And then it becomes a conversation, not a direction. And that could be in strategic meetings once a month, once a quarter, but it could even be in the weekly meeting, Joe. And this is the leap of faith I want people to think about. If you're the type of leader that comes in at the Monday morning meeting and starts saying, right, team, by the end of this week, we need to have gotten here. And Joe, I need you to do this. And Sally, I need you to do this. What I'm going to say is if you listen to Joe and you reverse that and turn it into questions, and you said to the team, hey, team, what do you think is our most important objective this week? And what makes that important? And how do you think we might achieve it? And what obstacles might we overcome? All of a sudden, they're included in the conversation. That was what was ringing in my head when I was listening to you, Joe. How does that sit with you?
Well, that sounds great. And actually, I will tell you, all the executives I interviewed from the book, every single one of them said the number one thing is that, asking questions of somebody else. And their main trick is to make sure they ask the right question. They also learned. I also, in my consulting career, it's a little different, but especially if you say, how are we going to get there at the end of the week? The context a little bit, I used to always tell my team, make sure you engage the skeptics and uncover the no's. Because, in our client work, we have to get someone to move. And if you skip, oh no, I've got the best answer. I'm BCG, except you don't know everything, and then you get in a meeting, oh, something sidetracks you. Everyone says, what the hell, consulting firm? So go, and the funny thing is the noologists are rarely blockers. Maybe 1 out of 1,000 is trying to be a pain. Most of the time, they do know something about what is wrong and what won't work. And the minute you know that, you can help solve it. So it's a version of yours. How do you think we get there? People also, no, but let's be careful too, because people do want to know that, well, I guess we started, that there is a path we're going towards. They don't want the leader to be every day coming, what are we going to do today? I'm lost. I mean, neither of us are saying that. Jack Kirby said to me when COVID, he was going to go on, he's CEO of United, and he didn't know when the planes were going to fly. And he said to his team, well, I got to talk to the group and say, to the employees on some big video and say, no, I'm not sure we're going to fly. You can't say that. You can't. He said, well, what am I going to do? Lie? I mean, nobody knows we're going to fly. So if there's any time to be vulnerable, it was that time, right? Because it was but even then his management, it's not fair. And some of his management team was, oh, no, but you're the CEO. You can't show that uncertainty. That uncertainty was inspiring to people because he also said, now let's all figure out together how to get from here to there. How do we hold it together in the meantime? He included them. He didn't just wear them.
I'm going to say that builds trust, Joe, because chances are people in the room know it anyway. And when you open up and say, well, team, this is where we're at, people relax and go, oh, okay, so the boss is telling the truth. This is great. So I think it builds trust. The two things that I picked up there are really good, the skeptics and the noologists.
Yeah, isn't that a great line?
That term is going to stick with me now forever. So the skeptics, if you don't engage the skeptics, they'll remain skeptical and they'll drag their feet, is what I'm thinking. I'm also thinking that the skeptics might know what the barriers are, what the hurdles are that no one else is talking about. And if you don't talk about those why nots or the barriers that are going to stop you, they might come back to trip you up later. So engage the skeptics.
Yeah, no, when you laid it out in the room where we want to go, how we get there, what might be the roadblocks, I actually am a believer in the roadblocks. I mean, 'cause if you can find all the roadblocks and make sure they don't happen, then the path will be to the right outcome. I mean, just think of the decision tree. You want to kill all the branches that are the wrong ones, and then nothing's left but the good one. I had a colleague who was brilliant at that. Someone said, oh, he does decision trees in his head. He always had good outcomes. But it's because he thought so hard about, or he engaged with everyone, what's not going to work. And so we're not taking that path. The only path left was, so that's, the skeptics are the noologists often because they know this isn't going to work. Why not? Boom. That's what you want. And then you solve it with them.
Yeah, good one. And then the other part I was thinking with the noologist term that you used, which is beautiful, I'm also picturing that if you don't engage in the right way, that those people might not actually be listening to the others in the room because they already think they know it all. What's your secret answer? Particularly if there are some people that have been in the business for 15 years or something like, or even longer. If you come across someone that portrays themselves as, I know everything, you can't teach me anything, to make sure that they're not just waiting for their turn to talk, that they're truly listening to the others around them so that they walk away from a meeting richer than they walked in, rather than just walking away from the meeting with the same knowledge that they walked into. Any tips there?
Well, that's funny because that kind of person almost has to be slapped around a little bit is what's going through my mind. So, because I mean, if I had someone really like that who thinks they always know it all, and therefore they become a blocker in a funny sort of way, right? Because I would probably publicly expose them, to be honest with you. I would probably probe them in the meeting in a way that they're not going to have the answer or something's going to expose, and it may hurt, but it's going to force them to, oh, I see, I got to think more. And, if they constantly are that way, I can't fathom they'll stay on the job. No offense. But, generous is one word. We are running a business and people have to perform is the other word.
I'm going to call that curated humility. So bring some humility to their life. Yeah. But I think it can be done in a nice way. But yeah. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. All right. Now, this has set the scene really well. Now, in your book, you talk about the 7 factors of the generous leader. I'd like to unpack that now, Joe. So why there's 7? So talk us through it, or I can read it out if you wish, but talk us through the 7 factors of what makes a generous leader.
Okay. And 7's a lot, so I'll be pretty precise. I mean, pretty concise. I mean, one I talk about is connecting personally and deeply. And we said that earlier, if you got, I told you about the person that inspired by inspirational thinking and ideas, others by numbers, but you need to take some time to figure out how can I communicate in a way that they hear it. Because that's what your words going blankly is a waste of your words. You're here. So we can go deeper in that if you want. Then we talked a lot about this whole idea of be curious, generous listening. I mean, that is just a fundamental piece. I'm going to go out of order because I think if you're really going to be a generous listener and also say, what does Mick know that I don't know? You've got to be a little bit vulnerable, a little bit authentic. If you think you have all the answers, you can't be a good listener. It doesn't go together. I talk about a lot about generous inclusion, which we discussed, which I really mean bring people into the room or engage with people 3 or 4 levels down that you might not normally engage with. To get one, they're inspired, and 2, you tend to learn things you don't know because you get all the layers out of your way. The other one I do talk about, so I feel quite strongly personally, is being a generous ally, being an action ally is what I mean by that, which really, I won't go deep in this if we could, but actually enabling people to have opportunities, setting the opportunity for them to walk through the door and perform. You don't do it for them. You don't ensure the perfect outcomes. You actually set up opportunities for people to have a chance to thrive and perform, and including those who have, I argue, less chances. That's a sensitive topic these days. Another thing that's critical, which we've kind of talked around, is this whole generous development, really about recognizing people's strengths and where they need to work and push them hard to get better. And that's not just being nice. We could talk about that, but I could tell stories with very direct feedback that just unlocked people. Now I had to think about, could I do it at that moment? If they're down, you don't kick them. And then a very simple thing which people can do is, I call it small act, big impact. Just capture capture opportunities for generous moments. And the most simple in the world is send an email to someone they do a hell of a job. And maybe you copy your boss or maybe you copy the entire team. People feel really good when they get the pat on the back. You don't remember your paycheck going up very often, I don't think. You remember when so-and-so said, hey, that was a really hell of a, and if somebody else knows it, you can share it with them. You remember that. So capture the generous moments. There's, small impact, small acts can have a very big impact. And they're quite easy to do as a leader. It doesn't take time. It takes the effort to do it. What we're talking about. So those are the 7 I think, really, most importantly, listening. When you're communicating, connect so they hear you. Bring yourself to the world so you are listened actually. And then help people grow and include people.
Yeah, brilliant, Joe. Okay, so we're going to unpack it one at a time just briefly. So the generous communication, let's start with that one. But I love that you just brought it straight to the word connectedness, so making a connection with someone. And it plays back to what we were saying before, that not everyone is the same. And you're making me think of, moving from the golden rule of treating people the way you want to be treated to the platinum rule of treating people the way they want to be treated. So you need to know your team, right? So you need to connect with your team to know with them. And then you can communicate in the way that they want to be communicated with. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, no, so it's well. I had just on the spirit of how might you do some of these things. Someone told me some tricks he used. One leader said he used to, when he'd say something, before he was going to say whatever it was that he was announcing, or even after he's got going, he'd bring someone in the room, obviously less tenured to him that he trusted and knew, and say, hey, what are people saying I'm saying? And they'd say, well, you're saying ABC. He said, no, I'm saying XYZ. Oh, no, sir, you're saying ABC. So, he thought he was, Joaquin Duato was a good example. When he took over CEO of J&J, he was talking about we have to reduce complexity in the organization. And the person he asked, so yeah, you just want to cut costs. I said, I never said that word. This thing's a mess. But that's, of course, everyone thinks complexity is cost. Or what Joaquin also did, I thought was clever. He wanted to give a talk to a large group. He'd bring a small group in and practice it. And they'd say, okay, what did I say? And he might have said the word, phone, and they heard the word, communication device. I don't know, so, and he'd say, oh, I'm going to write down the word they heard, not the word I used, and communicate in a way that people could hear. So it's pretty, so that's it, but it's just actually making sure the words are landing in the way they are hearing them.
Yeah, really good. There's a big lesson there. The human brain does this all the time. We take shortcuts, we extrapolate, we interpret meaning. Now, the question is, did we interpret the meaning that was intended? And I'm going to say the world is full of conversations, Joe, where two people have walked away from the same conversation with a completely different understanding of what was just agreed. And I can tell you, I've fallen into I'll stick up my own hand on this one and say I've fallen into this trap multiple times, and I don't always get this right. But what I try to do now, particularly in my one-on-ones, is one of the questions I ask at the end of the one-on-one is, so what have we agreed today? And I get them to play back, and I can go, no, that's not at all. Or it could be aligned, right? Yeah.
It's a very simple line that might waste, you think, a minute, but it saves hours of someone doing the wrong thing, and you can't get those hours back. You can get your minute lost is worthwhile.
Yeah, very good. Okay. All right. Excellent. Generous listening. Okay. So I want to test something with you here that I think is a little bit of what we were just saying about some of the extrapolation as well. One of the things I see a lot is confirmation bias takes over in our listening as human beings, us and our teams. They start hearing the things that confirm what they already believe, but they're not truly listening with an open mind to new ideas. How do we check in with ourselves, maybe before a meeting or something? How can we break this kind of trend of confirmation bias ruling what we're really processing in those meetings so that we're truly open to the ideas?
Yeah, well, I will say one thing. To your point of confirmation bias, some people are just intellectually stubborn, and it's very hard. I don't even know what to do with it. I mean, I've watched it at the consulting firm. People lose their job eventually because, if I can't listen to you as a client and hear what's on your head, and then decide how to move forward, you're not going to keep hiring me. I think, as you said that, I think there's two things. I think it probably comes back to the same thing you just said on the other one. Ask your own question. Okay, everybody, this is what I think I heard. Boom, boom, boom. Is that where we are? Now you have to be humble enough to do it. So much comes back to this, willing to say, I don't know, because you're admitting, I may not have known, but that's not a very hard thing to do either. It also saves a lot of time. But if you're really a stubborn listener, I actually think you won't get very far as a leader. So you're not going to be in the position, to be honest with you. But that's one trick I think is quite productive. So I heard this and this and this. Did I get that right? Oh, we actually said this. Oh my God, what did I miss?
Yeah, excellent, Joe. Okay. All right. Then we spoke about the authenticity and bringing our true self. I want to use the term from your book because it really caught my attention. I want the audience to hear this. Give up the mask. Give up the mask. And I sometimes say it like this, Joe, that imagine on TV shows or in the acting world, today the role of leader is played by Joe Davis. No, you're not playing a role. You are promoted into a leadership role because someone saw something in you. Just bring yourself to the table. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, that's very well. I think of a good friend of mine, BCG guy, he was handsome. His wife was attractive. His 3 kids were perfect. Everything was always perfect, so perfect. And he thought that was the image he should portray. It was just, there was no humanity there. And one time I said to him, you're a great leader, but nobody thinks you care. Oh my! And I said that like at 8:00 at night. He was asking for some feedback. He said, Joe, I couldn't sleep all night. I care deeply. I said, well, then you can't always act like everything is absolutely perfect because the rest of us are afraid of you. We can't even know, we don't know how to interact. Like, well, I can't be him. I can't be his family. So we're stuck. And therefore we don't even, if you do care, we can't process it. Oh, it was just shocking to him. It's just another version of this authenticity. But, if people see a human there and a few mistakes, you can't make mistakes every day, but a few mistakes, they say, I can, and if you do that and we haven't talked about development yet, but if you do that with listening to people, including them in meetings, asking their questions, engaging with them ways they hear, the whole package works together.
Yeah, really good. I'm going to challenge the audience to think about all the teams that you've worked in, all of the organizations. Was there one person that you've come across in your career that you were always scared to tell the truth to, or even scared to talk to at all, but you didn't want to take them bad news or whatever? Then yeah, it can be like what Joe is saying here. So, and you don't want to replicate that behavior yourself because you're then going to be that person 5 years from now. It's going to be you that people aren't talking to. Yeah, really good. All right, let's go to generous inclusion. Something that you said earlier that really caught my attention, that you when you walk into the room and you look at the most junior person and you ask their idea first. I love that on multiple levels. And I was thinking of is I think this came from Nelson Mandela's father, even the thought of being the last one to speak. Because if you come into the room and say, right, team, I want to hear your ideas today. Here's my idea, but what's your idea? He's just going to repeat what you said. So tell us more about how do we make sure that we're really collecting the ideas in this inclusive way?
I mean, isn't it pretty simple? Ask questions and keep your mouth shut. But to be both, sorry, but what do you want me to say? No, but I think, let me go one level deeper, because even with what you said, if you ask questions and keep your mouth shut, and you're number one and you're number two answer all the questions, then everybody else is going to shut up.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was picking up on. Yeah.
First, they're brave enough to speak. So I really do think I actually, it's funny because I'll think, okay, who should I? This is a meeting about that finance work. So let's bring a couple of finance analysts in. Oh, Joe, they can't come in the room. They can come in the room. The other boss is petrified because what are they going to? They're only going to tell what the data said. But bring a couple people in the room who may have done the work. And I'll tell you, countless executives told me the same thing. But then ask them the question first. Let them describe the analysis. Let them describe whatever it might be. Now you got to be I said this once, but they're going to be petrified, probably, all these big, whatever bosses. So you got to really make sure you bring them into the room. The other thing I think I try to do if you're going into a meeting like that is who's here, prep a bit. Who's here? What might I ask one or two of the less tenured people just to open them up? So I'll have you have time. Well, if you're walking 45, if it's a Zoom, if you're walking from getting a cup of coffee to the Zoom, think about, doesn't take a lot of time. Say, I'm going to be on the phone with Mick. What might I ask Mick to? You can do that. You're smart enough in 30 seconds or if you're walking down the hall. I think that's the important thing is ask questions of those who don't normally get an opportunity to speak. And you send a whole signal in the room. The whole room changes.
Yeah, it's really good. So I like it's a very intentional act. I like the preparation as well. I think that's a hint. And that might help with the question I'm going to ask as a follow-on. What about the introverts in the room or even someone that might have a fear of speaking up or fear of saying something stupid, etc. And it's not a founded fear, to be clear, but people have these fears, Joe, so we can't ignore it. How do we do this in a way that's not uncomfortable for, let's say, an introvert or not uncomfortable of feeling like you put someone on the spot?
Yeah, no, this I'm thinking because I have a great example of this, but you have to be thoughtful because some people may really be introverted and really be scared. And so to go in there and ask a bunch of questions is just mean. It's just mean. So, and I remember one time I had a finance person in one of my offices, and I said to the person in charge of finance, I said, well, she never speaks. I said, Joe, she's petrified. So I actually had her come into my office and just described it one-on-one, first time, some of the analysis and asked a few questions. And I took the time. I wanted to coach her, but I took the time to coach her to where she was comfortable talking about her work. And then I asked her publicly. But I had to find out what was wrong. I just didn't say, oh, she's quiet. What's wrong with her? I asked her boss what's going on. And I took the time to help her develop. If I hadn't done that, she would have been stuck. But I think, really, sometimes you don't be mean. You actually do some work to get them so they're comfortable in the room. But then the other thing you do ask, of course, if you're sure they're not that petrified, just ask them something they know something about.
Yeah, good one. Okay. That's a good way to start.
Give them a softball. What the hell? The point is open them up, not to get the most brilliant insight at the moment. And you may get a brilliant insight. You don't know.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is work out how to get the ball rolling. What is help them get unstuck, and getting unstuck might be in private, and then start the ball rolling with something very easy for them to answer on the spot. Yeah, I like it.
It goes back to if you have to believe that developing them and growing them is better for everybody. If you don't believe that, you don't believe what we're talking about, right? This is the basic thing. When the team hums, the odds are the organization's humming, the odds are the outcomes are great, and then you as a leader hum too. You have to believe that.
All right, great. All right, next one is generous ally. Where does someone start on? What does it look like, and where does someone start? How does someone take a baby step of being a good ally in the room?
Well, I guess the first thing you got to do is, is there somebody that you want to mentor, coach, and create opportunities for? But then the first step is you have to ask them. And I learned that sometimes they, oh yeah, I'll make so and so help them with. They may or may not want your help. They may or may not be ready. Blah blah blah. You have to ask them and talk about what where do they want to go, what are the aspirations, etc. And then so that's the first step, and then have a conversation about how can I help, because I think too many people think, oh okay, I'll just do it for you, or I'll just get you set up. I had many people say, no no no, I don't want you to do it for me. I just want you to give me a chance. So look for opportunities to give them a chance, to let them, engage, as we just said, give them up, walk through the door and shine or not shine, because they don't want you to do it for them. They still want your best coaching. You give your best coaching to anybody. But I think the first step is, if there's someone in this organization that I'd like to really help. Now, when we use the word ally, we're talking about someone who, by definition, because we just switch it to mentor if you want it, but by definition may not have the same opportunities as others for whatever reasons,
Yeah, so you're bringing equitable opportunity there. I really like that, but I love that it starts with the conversation, Joe, because I'm going to say that we talk about allyship a lot in the DEI world and in business. We talk about allyship. Even in societies, we talk about allyship. But if you haven't had a conversation with the person about what would help them and what they need and what it looks like, your well-intentioned actions may well do more damage than good, because you stepping in and doing it for them may disempower them, and you think that you're helping them, and all you've done is disenfranchise them, and they've go, oh, that bloody Joe, he took the thing that I wanted to do, right? So, all right, let's go to generous development. Now, this is something that keeps on coming up in a lot of surveys around what people are looking for in the workplace, and opportunities for learning and growth are certainly that comes into generous development. The other thing I loved you saying before is generous is not synonymous with nice. It doesn't have to be just Mr. Nice Guy all the time. So tell us what generous development looks like for Joe Davis.
Well, it's interesting. I'll start with a story. When I was, I don't know, I think it was 24, 25, at Procter & Gamble, I got promoted to the first level management. I had 3 sales reps. They were all, 2 of them were career sales reps. So I thought they were old guys who might be 45. I would ride with them every 2 weeks, supposedly to coach them and give them ideas and thoughts. Remember, I'm 24. I was petrified. I never said a thing. And then it came to the year in review. Got out my pen, wrote down everything they should do better based on whatever I'd learned in the manual. And I started going through the review in my boss's room with this guy, Rich. And I got in about 3 minutes in. He said, wait a minute, Joe. What the blank are you doing? You ride with me every 2 weeks and you've never told me any of this? And the truth is I was scared. I was 24. What do I tell a 40-year-old? But the lesson, and it took me a lot of years to process, that never stuck. It stuck with me. And what was the lesson of that? This person actually, every 2 weeks, even though I was a young snot, did want to hear what I had to say. They did want to grow and develop. They wanted, they didn't appreciate the fear. And they sure as hell didn't appreciate, and I've learned a lesson here, you never give feedback at the end of the year on a piece of paper that somebody hasn't, or there shouldn't be a single concept that they haven't heard somewhere along the way. So it's really about helping others grow to be the best they can be. But it takes understanding their strengths so they can leverage them, understanding their areas of development, but importantly, telling them, and that's what I think. You've asked roadblocks. So many people, and the roadblock can be either I'm too junior and fearful of it. I don't want them to think less of me and give me bad upward feedback or whatever it might be. Or I don't want anyone mad at me. You just get in your own head. Or just fear of being direct. I mean, the other thing I like to tell people is, mushy feedback is horrible. I mean, hey, Mick, I loved your show. I wish it could have been a little bit better. I loved your show, so I don't have anything to say. But, what could it be? What do you mean a little bit better? What am I supposed to do with that? What's a little, and I'll tell you a good, interesting story. One time where this was a little bit sad, but the concept of mushy, the person at BCG is an upper out place, and this fellow wasn't going to make it up to the partner level. And his career rep was telling him, you're not going to make it. I was in the room, it's the head of the office. And the rep was going on and on. After maybe 5 or 6 minutes of, even I didn't understand what the person was saying. He looks over to me and says, am I being fired? And I said, yes. He said, oh, thank you. So 6 words. Now, I didn't like being fired, but it was clear. It's to the point. And then let's move on to, what do I do next? How do I, move into the problem? I'll tell one more story. So, another guy came over from Europe. He was a rock star in Europe. senior guy. He was underperforming in the U.S. He's 2 years in, I'm underperforming. 3 years at a partner level, and you're kind of in big trouble. And I knew he was bothering the hell out of him. I thought about it. I took the time to think about where is he and what. So one day I finally said, and not finally, but I said to him, I said, Sam, it's not his name, Sam, either you go home, you quit, or I fire you. You pick. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to go home. So he was sitting there because he's a high performer. So he's used to doing well. He was stuck. He didn't want to face it. But, he decided to go home. And people say to me, well, how could you say that so harsh? I'm going to fire you. I said, because I thought about where he is and I knew damn well he was sitting there at night losing sleep over what am I going to do? I'm used to being a rock star and now I'm stuck. He wasn't feeling good about himself. I had to think about him. I had to care about him. I had to think about the moment to say that. And that took time. I wasn't 4 years in my job then. I was probably 25 years in the job because giving good feedback does take experience also because you just have to learn a little bit. But I learned at 25, most everybody wants to hear feedback that's going to help them grow and develop.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting, Joe. I'm going to come back to the very first story that you spoke about there and with the person that gets the feedback at the end of the year. I'm going to say, if you're a leader that's avoiding feedback, put yourself in that person's shoes. Imagine that you've been doing 12 months of work and you find out at the end of the year you've been missing the mark. That's completely unfair. It's completely unfair. So the feedback and drawing it to their attention is a gift. It's a gift to help them to rectify it early rather than waiting 12 months later to find out that they were doing it the wrong way or in a way that was not acceptable or...
Yeah, they could have been better.
Or could have been better, whatever. Yeah.
No, and the truth is, you're only paying a price yourself because your team is, I mean, the way you just played that back to me, I was going to get embarrassed. I said, holy crap, that guy could have been doing better, which means I could have been doing better. What was wrong with me?
Yeah,
I know what was wrong. I was 24 and scared. I learned, but that was not an excuse. It's very fascinating when I think about it.
And then the clarity, the clear is kind of message is what I was taking away there, Joe. And I'm going to say that for both the positive feedback and the constructive feedback, the more specific you can be, the more that they can repeat the good things and stop doing the thing that wasn't working, right? So saying, like, Joe, you're a public speaker, you coming off the stage and me saying, Joe, oh, that was great, it was fantastic, doesn't actually help you that much. But if I said to you, Joe, I really love this part of the speech where you told this story or whatever, then you know specifically what worked for me, not just I enjoyed your speech. How does that sit with you? Be specific for both the positive and the constructive. Yeah,
absolutely. So, that was really great. Okay, but what could have been better? The minute someone says that, then I'm also like, come on, nothing's really great. Now I'm humble enough. Oh, one trick on that one, which is, when you walk out of a meeting or a sales meeting or a pitch or whatever, debrief yourselves right then and there. And, do it with thoughtfulness. If somebody really messed up, it's a big thing to remember too. I'm a big believer in being direct feedback, but if someone's really down, it ain't the time to kick them. You got to think about them. And somebody else, if someone just gets promoted, I had one man who said, that's the best time, Joe, to go and tell everybody, that person, everything they really got to work on because they're feeling so good about themselves right then that they will hear it, process it. It's interesting.
Yeah. All right, very good. And generous moments. You spoke about the email, etc. I think this is your opportunity for people to feel seen and heard and valued. And they're the little moments. So one I want to share with you here, Joe, could be handwritten notes, or it could be just. Here's one that I'm starting to practice more and more now, Joe. Is to remember something from a previous conversation and bring it into this conversation. Joe, I've been thinking about our last conversation, and when you said X, Y, Z, have you thought about A, B, C? I think that's a generous moment to show I see you, I hear you. So, and these can be micro moments that make all the difference. How does that sit with you, Joe?
That sits beautifully. To use the word you probably use, but no, it is the micro moments that make a huge. I'm just going to steal your point because one of my colleagues, a junior person, said to me, she loves it if she says to her manager, hey, I got a big weekend. My kid has a soccer tournament. And that's good luck to you. And then on Monday or Tuesday, if he said, hey, by the way, how was that soccer tournament? How'd your son do? She's like, holy shit. She goes, literally, I will follow that person, not any, but to the ends of the earth. Because he took the time to remember, and it was 90 seconds. It didn't take the whole day. It didn't waste any time. It's, or just, I mean, I'm a big believer in remember my team's birthdays. Now I cheat. I put it on my calendar, so I don't have to remember. And I send happy birthday. Hope you have a great day in the subject line. Everyone, now I've been doing it for 30 years now. So people, when I retired, I still do a lot of BCGs. They always wonder if the Joe Davis happy birthdays were going to come to an end. And, they know I put it in the computer and they know but they still loved it. And it takes 5 minutes in the morning. People think, oh my God, but I got to get on to the next thing. But finding those moments, like you said,
they make all the difference. It really does. All right. So let's summarize it a little bit and then we'll go to our rapid round, Joe. So the generous leader, all right? So have a think of what I want to inspire you to do. Have a listen to this list and I want you to pick, talking to the audience here, I want you to pick one and think about what you could lean in and do something a little bit more in these areas. So generous communication, generous listening, give up the mask, but come to work as your authentic self, generous inclusion, the generous ally, generous development, generous moments. Which of these can you pick and lean into? And then once you've practiced that, you can go to the next one. And I absolutely, Joe will not promote his book. He's too humble to do that. I'm going to promote it for him. Grab a copy of Joe's book and you can lean into each of these 7, but go one at a time and you'll start seeing a difference in your team. All right, Joe, thank you so much. Let's go to our rapid round. These are the same 4 questions we ask all of our guests. So what's the one thing you know now, Joe Davis, that you wish you knew when you were 20?
I do wish I'd known better to shut up and listen and ask questions. And over the years, one time, one quick one, real quick. Someone said to me, she was telling me something, and I started to cut her off. She goes, Joe, would you just shut up and let me finish? And she said, this is the 3rd time you've done this. And I thought I knew where she was going, but I may have been wrong. But she hit me so hard. That was 20 years in. I wish I had known that much earlier.
Yeah. Okay. That hits hard. That's really good, Joe. Okay. What's your favorite book?
That's a cheating question. So, I think when people do ask me that, I love the Shackleton Endurance. I do love that book. So cool. Now, I have fun with the Sarah Maas fantasy books, all those series. So I had to bring a fun one in because once I read one of those, I don't stop. So those are fun.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Very good. Now, what is your favorite quote?
Well, I'm not into famous quotes, but I will say something that moved me recently, which was David Brooks. He talked about in his book, think about in your, when you retire, there's a retirement speech, which is often about he drove business here, drove business there. But when you die, it's a eulogy, which is about your legacy. And what is it that you want your legacy to be? And think about that when you're 30 and 40, not about the dying part, your legacy, not your business success. And not quite a quote, but it really moved me, think about the legacy described in your eulogy, not the retirement speech when you quit.
Yeah, well done, sir. Okay, I love it. Finally, there's going to be people that are enthralled by this, Joe, and thinking about their own leadership, thinking about the development of their organizations around this concept of the generous leader. How do people find you if they'd like to know more?
Well, if you want to find me, actually go on LinkedIn and leave a message. I will respond, and I'll trade emails and we'll figure out how to connect. And I'm pretty good about tracking that. I have a website, joedavis.com. You can just hear more of kind of what I think about, whether you're listening to podcasts or talks or whatever. And then if you want to read the book, obviously it's on Amazon and the other sites as they are.
Yeah, brilliant, Joe. Well, thank you. Congrats on the success of the book. Thank you for your time and sharing your wisdom with us today. You've given us a lot to think about, but also some actions that we can all take to become a better and more generous leader. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mick. That was fun.
What an enlightening conversation with Joe Davis. He reminded us that leadership isn't about holding on to power, it's about giving it away. Generous leaders are present, they listen, they show humility, and they empower others to shine. When leaders bring their humanity to work, they create cultures of trust, connection, and lasting success. Now it's your turn. How will you practice generous leadership this week? Share your reflections with us on LinkedIn or YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so these lessons can reach even more leaders around the world. In the next episode, we'll be doing something a little different. I'll be hosting my solo cast where I'll be reflecting on the biggest lesson from all of our amazing guests during August and exploring what's happening right now in the world of leadership. It's a chance to step back, connect the dots, and look ahead together. Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mixbeers.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.